So, good morning. Today is the 4th day of Iyar, and it's also the 25th of April. We're in the third reading of Parshat Acharei-Kedoshim, the two parashot joined together. And today's topic is one of the, one might say, the high points of the Torah prohibitions. And actually, this topic repeats in both parshas. So here we're getting the first dose. The first dose is here in Parshat Acharei Mot, and it begins in chapter 18, verse 1. And we'll see it later in the week, repeated again in the Kedoshim. And the topic is one of prohibited sexual contact, and with whom we have these prohibitions. So just to start it off, I'll just read the very introduction. It says like this: "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am Havaya, your God. You must not imitate the practices of Egypt where you dwelt, and you must not imitate the practices of Canaan, to which I am bringing you." What are these practices that we may not imitate? You must not even follow their social conventions. You must perform my ordinances and safeguard my rules to pursue them. I am Havaya, your God. And then he tells us what are these prohibitions. No man may come near to any of his or her close relatives to uncover their nakedness, which literally means to fornicate. I am Havaya. You must not uncover the nakedness, again, have sexual contact with your father. What does it mean, your father? You can't have it with your father. So he says here, his wife, even if she is not your mother. Meaning, the nakedness of my father also includes his wife, even if she's not my mother, if he was married the second time or whatever else. And so on. You must not uncover the nakedness of your wife, of your father's wife, your father's nakedness, even if he is dead. This verse means even if he has passed away already. And regarding the nakedness of your sister, and it continues with that. The one that's most interesting, but we won't have time to talk about it really today, just on the surface, is verse 10. It says, regarding the nakedness of your son, or son's daughter, or your daughter's daughter, you must not uncover their nakedness. Meaning you cannot have relations with them, for they are your own nakedness. Now, a lot of people don't notice that he skipped a generation. He said, your son's daughter and your daughter's daughter. It does not mention your daughter, even though we know that the daughter is clearly the first circle of prohibitions. So there's a whole question about why the daughter is not mentioned. If we have time, maybe we'll get into it tomorrow, but today we won't have time. Instead, what I'd like to do is to start off with what he said here, with the language that he uses. These are God's ordinances, and he translated here ordinances as rational commandments, meaning things that we would understand by our rational understanding of human nature and so on. And so, for instance, we can understand that people need a Sabbath, they need a day of rest. It's a logical, rational commandment. To honor our parents is a logical, rational commandment. There are many commandments that we would have done something similar anyway. But these are described specifically as my laws or my rules. And here, chukim, and chukim, a chok, means something that is super rational. It's not according to our rational understanding. Now, this is something that really needs to be discussed, because is it really rational? Is it really some kind of super rational idea that I should not fornicate with my close relatives? Why would that be the case? Now, when you think about it as someone who's already married, that's adultery. We're not talking about those situations. That we understand. Now I'm talking about something much simpler. Why would it be wrong for me to marry in a holy, positive way any of these relatives? On the contrary. Now, a little bit of thought about how human nature works. For a marriage to be successful, I know that people like to say opposites attract. Maybe they attract, but they're not a very good basis for marriage. For marriage, really, you need a person who is similar to you, as similar as possible, coming from the same background, speaking the same language, having the same values, the same purpose in life, having the same goals, having the same expectations from family. The closer you are, the easier it is. The more distant you are, the more you're piling on problems. That marriage is difficult enough as it is, and if you now have to overcome things that are make us diverse and different, it makes it all the more difficult. By the way, that was one of the main arguments that the Rebbe used to say to people when they came to him and there was a prospect of a mixed marriage in terms of religion. So he explained to them, look, your marriage is basically doomed from the beginning, because even if you think religion does not play a part in your lives, it does play some part that's subconscious and you don't know it yet. But when the education of the children comes up, when the nature, the atmosphere of the household, all these things, when they start coming up, you will have intense arguments about this, and eventually it will tear you apart. So the Rebbe, from a very practical point of view, said that the further apart you are, and all the more so if you're from different religions, the less chance your marriage stands. And so the closer you are from the same family and from the same stock and having the same background, the easier it is for you actually to be married. And so that is the reason why these types of relationships, it is a law, a super rational law, to forbid them, because actually these should have been the basis of marriage. I want to add to this something incredible that is told about that was told about the night when the Jewish people heard that they wouldn't be going into the land of Israel. It was a Tisha B'Av, and they had sinned with the sin of the spies. And it says there that they cried also about their families. And it's not very clear exactly what is it talking about. What do you mean about our families? It says something very basic, which is that a person who has any kind of amount of wealth is most interested in leaving that wealth within his family. He doesn't want his children to marry out. He would prefer that his children would marry as close as possible. And so what is the closest possible? The closest possible is my son and my daughter. That is actually what he would prefer. And he knows that that's actually the best. From the point of view of human nature, that's actually the best marriage. In fact, when the world was started, it was started by those types of marriages. Cain married his sister. Abel married his sister. The opinion that is usually, there's two opinions about it, but the tribes, the 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob, they also married their sisters. That was considered to be actually the best way to both handle the marriage and to ensure that the wealth stayed within the family. So when they cried also about the fact that a few months earlier, a year and a half earlier, they had heard at Sinai, and they had heard now, and in our Parsha and so on, that this is all going to end. You can't do this anymore. And you actually have to distribute the wealth. And you have to distribute, today we would say you have to distribute the gene pool. but it's really contrary to human nature. It would seem that most people would prefer to get married to actually these relatives. We look at it a little bit in our modern world as being like some kind of hillbilly type of mentality. But that mentality is actually very pragmatic and understands it makes it easiest. And so this is a really tall order that God wants. He says, look, from now on, you can't do this anymore. Why is this? Why does God take away maybe the best ingredient that makes the recipe of a good marriage? The same coming from the same family, or coming from a near place. So this in and of itself is a tremendous question. Like, why is God doing this? Why is He not allowing us to ensure how good the marriage will be? And this also touches upon this notion that we'll need to explain later, that this is mentioned twice. First of all, it's mentioned in our parsha, and like we said, we're going to hear about it again in the next parsha. So we'll deal more with that question later on in the week. Just now, I want to explain a little bit about the daughter, just to touch upon it, because we have a couple of minutes left. The Torah says that the teaching in this verse that you should not marry, you should not fornicate with your daughter's daughter and your son's daughter, teaches by what we call a major argument and a minor argument. So if the strong argument says, the weak argument says, I can't even be with my granddaughter, then all the more so that I can't be with my daughter. Except that there's a problem with that. It makes a lot of sense. The only problem is that we have another principle in Torah which says we cannot punish someone based on this type of reasoning. Why? Because as much as this is very reasonable to say, if I can't be with my granddaughter, all the more so I can't be with my daughter. As much as that is logical reasoning, and most people would accept it, there are people that will come and say, no, I don't accept this. Why? Because there's some counter argument that I can bring to you. A counter argument. Some argument that says, no, actually, what is major, the difficult case is actually your granddaughter. And your daughter who's closer to you, there it's permitted. Someone would come and say that, and so we don't punish from this type of argument. If something was not stated explicitly in the Torah, we don't use this type of argumentation to punish someone. Instead, we use something entirely different. What do we use? In this case, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says that instead of using this type of argument, we say, Ervat bat bincha, the daughter of your son, and we learn it from what's called a gzeira shava. That, and we'll look at it more because we're out of time. We'll look at it more a little bit tomorrow. That there are two words that are the same in two verses, and from those two words we learn that what applies legally to one applies to the other, even though they're in two different places. We'll look more at this tomorrow, but notice that this is also super rational. Because who in the world can ensure that if the Torah uses one word in one place, another word in another place, somehow they're supposed to match? Theoretically, this is almost arbitrary. And yet the Torah or the sages preferred to learn it this way, that the daughter is forbidden, and not to learn it by logic, because again there's this super rational notion. And again, this was shocking to me to hear this, but in most of the United States, most of the girls are actually first encounter sexuality with their father. It's a statistic that is horrendous for most people, but that seems to still be the case. There's something actually natural about it. And the Torah says, no, you're going to have to go beyond the super rational. beyond the rational. You're going to have to go into super rational to understand why these things are forbidden. So God willing, we'll look at it a little bit more tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Thank